So, remember last we talked on, I guess it was the opening of Frank Brown, right?
Yes, we did.
And what we were talking about was the whole idea of 21st century communication, which I think was a term you sort of coined. Talk to me about how the 21st century communication impacts what you do in the classroom.
Well, the 21st century communication impacts the classroom greatly because when we started out with technology, the Web 1.0 world, we were just entering information in and hitting print and just kind of seeing the product of what we put in. And then we've kind of been stationary in a Web 2.0 world where we are able to search the internet, get information fed back to us, and then we produce work from it. But we've moved beyond that. We're in a Web 3.0 world where we have learning communities that are online. We can Skype or have a Google Hangout into other classrooms. We can have pen pals and club meetings using those Google Hangouts, virtual field trips. And so we're not only just putting information in and getting it back out, we're networking across the Web 3.0 world and collaborating with other groups.
So your term about Web 3.0 now, so how could you maybe stream what you do in a classroom when you're trying to teach folks how to use new active learning pedagogies, for example? How could you use streaming? How could that help you?
Stop motion video, which is a lot of still frames put together and creates motion.
Oh, right.
And so
yeah.
that would be perfect to be able to relay and stream out. They were also required to upload it to our private Facebook group, which other students were then allowed to see what other students were working on and comment and give feedback and just working together.
But you're thinking that the work you do needs to be broadcast to a wider audience so that it can maybe have a leverage effect and get that information out?
I think a perfect example for streaming online and being able to connect with other universities, for one class that I teach is creative activities, so that would definitely be a benefit to see what other universities are doing in that same pedagogy of how do you incorporate creative activities into the classroom and into your teaching and move more away from worksheets. And I think that you definitely could stream videos of what we are doing and creating. I know that I focus on STEM activities, creative activities,
right. Mm-hmm.
And so my pre-service teachers students are they are incorporating science with technology all the time and mathematics, and we're even going into a little bit of STEAM, which creates the arts, being brought to dramatic arts into it. And so being able to see what other schools, universities are doing would be hugely helpful for the pre-service teachers.
So if I change track on you a little bit,
okay.
I'm going to go to some ideas that I'm using in my summer class.
Okay.
And since you won't be teaching this summer, we're going to set it up to where you can anyway, but
okay.
you just won't be there. And then
right.
we'll be using streaming. So my question goes to the idea of active learning practices.
Okay.
So how do you engage students in active learning practices and get away from some of the old models that are more teacher-centric?
Everything I try to do, I try to steer away from the teacher-centric, the active learning. Definitely want them communicating with each other, sharing what they are doing, observing each other, peer observing each other, co-teaching together. Oh gosh, these are hard questions.
No, you're doing great.
No. Let's see. What else?
So let's say we're talking to a veteran teacher
okay.
who was maybe trained at a different time where there were some problem-based learning kinds of things, but essentially the classroom looked like teacher starts the class, then there's a discussion, teacher asks questions, students answer the questions, teacher lead them through the activities.
Yeah, we don't do that in our classroom.
Yeah, tell me how that works.
Okay, for an example, a summer class that I do teach, I'm moving it online this summer because I'm not able to teach it on campus this summer, but how there were several veteran teachers in there, and they just felt like they were stifled and they were bored. They couldn't
Right.
grow anymore. So I was hoping to just bring in, I'm huge advocate of creative activities in the classroom. I think without it, students, there's just a disconnect. So if you think about the author Leo Leone, who has written
Right.
lots of books, I brought those books into that summer course and spread them across the table. And we took one book for every class. Sometimes we would approach 3, and we would talk about how could you stem Leo Leone. And so I'm actually writing an article on stemming Leo Leone. So you take his literature books, and then let's have students construct a giraffe using Legos, and then so that can they then take the inchworm and measure the height of the animal that the inchworm comes across different animals. So they're measuring the height, then they're creating, well, what if the inchworm came across this created animal? Well, then they'd have to create their own animal.
Right.
And so we used Legos as a piece for science, math, to teach ecosystems, and it was also literature all together in one.
There's a lot of basis in neuroscience for why that's effective. It talks about just immersing yourself in the work creates neural networks that then when students sleep overnight and then they repeat those kinds of activities in another way the next day, the neural networks grow and they grow stronger than trying to put aside isolated bits of information. So I guess in crafting my next question, it goes to, is that it's the heart of some of what you're doing, or is it basically your experiences or best practices? What drives your active learning approaches?
But I think that finding a connection, and in life there's a connection. In the world, everything is connected, and if you can bring a connection across the board, whether it be in all subjects or just in everyday life, I think people learn, they pay attention, they notice, when you see those patterns and connections, it's remembered. And so it reminds me of my 5-year-old right now. She's a struggling reader, she's a low reader. So studying those words in isolation, or trying to read this sentence, she's trying to isolate these words and sound them out, but they're not making sense together. So one thing that has been very successful for her is, let's make a connection with some of the words that you are reading. So let's lay the word in 3 different index cards for can, okay? Let's take the C out, and what other word is it? Ran, tan, man. And then she finally lights up and she sees the pattern of, it's the same word.
Right.
Just the beginning changes. And so we even go into nonsense words as well that don't make any sense, but she seems to light up when she sees that pattern and that connection. And if I can do that just in my teaching and make everything connect, and that veteran teacher light up and see a different way to approach teaching rather than that worksheet or asking a question and responding and it be something totally different, then I consider myself successful.
What role do you think get along skills play in good teaching? What do they play in maybe even success in the world? And I'm talking about collaboration, innovation, being able to listen, all those different kinds of skills. What role do you think that plays in the work you do and maybe success in life generally?
Well, in life we have to do that. We have to collaborate and we get along and communicate and be successful. So one example, when I am teaching pre-service teachers, we don't just read a chapter in the book and answer questions. We have literature circle roles, and they are in small groups, and each person has a role that they have to bring to the table for that week. So they are either the word watcher, finding words that they may not know so that they can explain to the group, or words that stood out. If it's the discussion director, they are in charge of the guiding questions for that chapter. And the connector is in charge of reading that chapter and making connections to the real world and what's going on around us while we are reading that chapter. And so it's really neat to watch when you walk into a classroom and they immediately walk in and sit down and they get activated in their learning and leading and guiding the classroom, and I'm facilitating and walking around. It's really neat. So I think it's important. We have to do it in life, so why not in the classroom?
Right. So we've been talking today with Dr. Pam Wetherington and Dr. Heather McKeen about 21st century learning, about 21st century teaching practices, and the juncture between what we do in the classroom and how we reach out to the world.